Hello friends, welcome back to the studio. I'm Buddy here at House of Props, and this week's build ties into several of my most recent builds. I'm talking about this EVA foam Legolas Lothlorien Quiver. This quiver is the one Legolas carries throughout most of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, but I couldn't just make the quiver alone. I had to include the scabbards, the knives, and the bow holder straps as well. Interestingly, while I was doing my research, I found that early photos of the scabbards depict them as whitish. In fact, in the Weapons and Warfare book, it describes them as having pearl finishes. But I found this image from Weta, and the scabbards are a dark brown. But as you know, I really like to stick to what I consider gospel, which is how did they look in the film. And here as well, they are a dark brown. The only reason I can figure why they changed is that during filming, the white scabbards stuck out too much on camera, so they were changed so they didn't distract. I posted a link to the template below in case you want to build one for yourself along with me. So without any more intro, let's head to the studio and let's get started. The body of the quiver is made by using parts A through F. Parts A, B, and C make the front, and parts D, E, and F make the back. To attach the pieces, I'm using contact cement, and since the quiver has some curves and bows to it, I want to make sure each edge is thoroughly covered with an even layer of glue. Then I use a heat gun to dry the glue out a little so it can be attached. You want to attach glue to glue, so make sure you put glue on each edge you want to stick together. If the glue is too wet or too dry, it won't hold correctly. This is why I use the heat gun to dry the glue until it loses its wetness shine. Then the pieces can be attached to each other. I'm trying to keep the top of the pieces flush, and I push and pull the pieces in order to make sure the registration marks align. Once I have the top secure, I firmly press the rest of the edge together. As I was working, I found I needed to give the outer sides of A and C a slight bevel in order to attach the other three pieces. To do that, I used a medium grit sanding drum on my Dremel and just knocked back the edge to give more room for the other quiver panels to attach. Then the remaining D, E, and F can be attached to the front. Sealing up the edge between F and A can be a little tricky, only because you have to really bend the foam to get the edges to reach each other. And while you stretch, keep an eye on your other seams and make sure they aren't separating from the strain. And once that edge is sealed, you're left with the basic shape of the quiver. The bottom needs sealed, so I applied glue to the inside, used the heat gun to dry it, and pressed it together like so. I used the Dremel to just even off the bottom a little bit. Next, I switched to a smoothing stone on my Dremel and proceed to clean up the seams a little. You don't want to remove a lot of material, just enough so that any unevenness in the seams is lessened. Now, this next step is optional, but I've found that it really helps hiding seams and joints. What I am going to do is skin the entire shape with some 2mm EVA foam. This means it'll need less time later on when it comes to cleanup, and the hint of any seams between the pieces will be completely obscured. I attach it with the contact cement and slowly work the foam onto the surface by pressing and rubbing to remove wrinkles and air pockets. While I smooth that out, I would really appreciate it if you would click the subscribe button if you haven't already. It's completely free to you and will help my channel grow. Plus, if you click the notification bell, you can customize your notifications so you never miss a project. Thank you. Once the foam is pressed down, I trim away excess to get the quiver shape. This way, application of the skin is a lot easier because I don't have to worry since the foam piece is larger than the quiver. Then I applied a piece to the front, trimmed away the excess, and used the Dremel and sanding drum to clean up the seam. Mine ended up two-tone because I ran out of white, but it actually really helped having it two colors because it separated the front from the back and made it easier for me to keep straight which was which. Along the seams I have a couple of gaps, but that's no big deal. I'm going to fill those in now with some of this quick seal. And to apply it, I just spread it on with a palette knife, smooth it off, and let it dry, which will only take about an hour or two. Next, part G can be attached to the top opening in the quiver. The piece aligns to the side seam and wraps all the way around to the same spot. Then I use the Dremel again to sand and even up the top edge and clean up the seam. Part H gets attached the same way to the bottom of the quiver. My part H is 2 pieces, but I made the template as 1 piece to make application and cleanup easier for you. And the Dremel is used yet again to clean up edges and seams. Part I is aligned onto part H so that the center of I is on the side with the longer point like so, and then part I wraps around the front and back to align with itself on the other side of the quiver. Part J is attached in the same manner, just like this, on the front and wraps around to the back to line up with itself as well. Then, using the polishing stone on the Dremel, I slightly round over the edges of parts I and J and blend the joins. This is easier to do with the pieces attached than if they were loose. Now I'm going to start making the knife and bow attachment which sits on the rear of the quiver. I begin with parts K and L. Part K is the flap which will hold the bow, and L consists of 4 straps. The straps can be attached to their corresponding locations on part K, and these are each labeled on the template. To add an extra feature and some support, I'm using some crochet yarn and an upholstery needle to make an X through both pieces. This will help hold the pieces together when supporting the bow, and it adds a nice detail to the connection point. Then the edge of K with the longer strips is attached to this edge of part M like so. Press the pieces together firmly. I always use contact cement with working with foam, but sometimes there is a need to use other glues, and when I do I will let you know, but otherwise it's always contact cement. On these shorter straps is where the small O-ring will get attached. The file for these and all other hardware used with this project are included with the template. The shorter strap can be pulled through and glued down onto itself. The longer strap can be pulled through the O-ring and loosely tied in a knot. So now this piece is looking like this, and you want to attach it to the back of the quiver in this orientation. The flaps that will hold the bow must stick off to the side just like this. As you can see on mine, I drew in a registration line so I knew how to place the piece. To this, the scabbards and knives get attached, but before dealing with those, I'm attaching the part end straps. These straps will hold the scabbards in place. The shorter strap gets attached to the left so that it creates a loop. Then one of the longest straps gets connected aligned 6 inches diagonally from the loop we just made. This gets glued in the middle and will be tied around the scabbard in a little bit. The medium length strap gets attached into a loop right here, and the second longer strap 6 inches diagonally from it. To figure out exactly how the quiver is held onto Legolas, I took one of my figures and tried to really plot the straps across the chest and how they connect to the quiver and each other. A strap comes over the shoulder, through a strap with a buckle, and then wraps across the chest back to the quiver. About an inch below the bow holder, I slice the seam on the side of the quiver and squeeze in the part O strap labeled for the D-ring. I stick it in about an inch and glue it in place with CA glue. The longest strap, which crosses over the chest, is attached the same way, about an inch and a half above the bow holder. And the strap labeled for the buckle is centered between the two but on the opposite side of the quiver. To apply the embossed design to the straps, I'm using this 3D printed stamp, which the file is included with the template. To emboss foam, you want to heat up the foam slightly with a heat gun and then press the stamp firmly into the foam and hold in place for a few seconds. Then the process can be repeated down the length of each strap. Now, the front of the quiver gets a highly detailed peacock design scored into it, and once it's traced onto the quiver, I take a hobby knife and score the foam. I'm not slicing all the way through, just about halfway through the 2mm foam skin. Then using the heat gun, I lightly waft over the scored lines, and the heat will cause them to open up slightly and be more visible. This happens because the heat causes the foam to shrink a little, and the shrinkage opens up the lines, creating intricate details. With the quiver heat sealed, it is ready to begin getting painted. To start as a primer, I use Plasti-Dip. This works really well on foam pieces because it's flexible and can move with the foam without cracking or splitting. And for this project, I spray the quiver with 3 even layers and let each layer sit for half an hour before applying the next. Then once the plasti dip has been left to cure overnight, I begin painting. To start, I brush on some metallic gold enamel onto the top and bottom of the quiver, and then pounce the paint with a paper towel to blend out brush marks. For this next step, I'll be using rubbing alcohol as my thinning agent. I make a mixture of burnt sienna and burnt umber, thin this with the rubbing alcohol, and spray this onto the body of the quiver with an airbrush. I like using the rubbing alcohol because it's cheaper and it evaporates quickly, so you're less likely to get drips and runs in your paint job. Next, I make a mixture of espresso, flamenco red, and a little king's gold yellow. This I thin with some water and brush it onto the quiver once the airbrushing has dried. Then, using a crumpled up paper towel, I pounce the fresh paint. It removes the brush marks, but it also leaves behind a texture which greatly resembles a leather texture, which is perfect for this. When that layer is dry, I thin some of the espresso with water and brush this around edges and creases, and dab with the paper towel again. This will add some natural aging to the leather as well as color variation. Then when that's dry, I repeat the process with a black wash, except I don't cover as much area with the black, only near edges and in the creases. You want the wash to be really thin, or the black will build up too quickly. It's best for it to be too thin and build up coverage. To start painting the peacock detail, I began by painting the eyes of the feathers with a forest green. While that is still wet, I dab in some light green and blend the two slightly so that each individual color is still visible. Then the rest of the design can be painted with the gold enamel. You want to paint between the cut scored lines and only try to cover the leather areas. Once the gold is dry, take the black wash and a 00 round brush and try to accentuate some of the feather scalloping on the bird's body. This is a detail which is only visible in photos from when some of the film props were on display years ago. With all of the paint dry, I'm going to give the quiver a light dusting with some gloss clear coat. The acrylic paints used were flat finishes, and the slight gloss will make the quiver look like it is made with real leather like the original film prop. Now, at this point, it's time to work on the scabbards and the knives. I'm not going to go into too much detail here because this video would be way too long, but if you want a more in-depth video about how to clean and paint 3D prints, check out the Legolas knife video I made a few weeks back. First, the pieces are glued together with CA glue and sanded with some 220 grit sandpaper. For the knives, I'm going to be using the handles and a piece of the knife blade, because I'll glue these in place so they give the illusion of the knives, but they won't be functional. The pieces are coated with a mixture of glazing and spot putty with acetone. This is thickly applied and will help fill in any visible layer lines in the 3D prints. After that dries, the pieces are sanded with the 220, sprayed with a 2-in-1 filler and sandable primer, and then sanded with the 220 sandpaper again, and then wet sanded with some 1000 grit sandpaper. Gold enamel is applied to the scabbard accent areas, and the base is painted with some burnt umber acrylic. Once that's dry, the flamenco red is applied as a wash, and then pounced and blended with the paper towel. The black wash is applied around the creases and in the engraved design on the rear of each scabbard. Any overflow can be blended with the water and a paper towel. Once all dry, the scabbards can be sprayed with a light layer of a glossy clear coat to both protect the paint and give them a slight shine like real leather. The knife handles can be painted just like in the knife video, and the knives can be glued and inserted into the scabbards with CA glue like so. Then the scabbards can be slipped through the part end loops on the quiver, and the longer straps can be tied around them like this. The buckle, which has been smoothed like the scabbards, can be glued onto its corresponding strap by taking the split end of the strap and wrapping it around the thicker peg. The D-ring can be glued onto its strap just like the O-rings were. Then using a cap on a ballpoint pen, I press the cap into the foam to create some small circle indents. These will look like rivets holding the leather strips together, and they can be painted with the gold enamel. And with that, the quiver is complete. Here you can see the finished prop with the arrows and the bow from previous videos incorporated in. The quiver is highly detailed but really easy to assemble. I was worried about attempting to take this on, but it turned out so much better than I would have ever had hoped. Let me know what you think. By adding the scabbards to the rear of the quiver, it adds more authenticity to the prop and makes it ready for your next cosplay. Even though this is foam and 3D printed, the quiver is sturdy enough it could be used in LARPing as well. Well everyone, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and check out the other Legolas themed builds. If you want to make your very own quiver, I posted a link to the template and the hardware files below. Again, please give this video a thumbs up, share it with all your friends and family, subscribe if you haven't, and I'll catch you on the next one. Have a great day. And remember, if you are building any of my builds or using any of my templates, feel free and tag me at House of Props on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, because I would really like to see your fantastic work. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.